The Prime Minister of Great Britain tried to cancel your vote. Not delay it slightly, not postpone it for a week. Cancel it. Remove it. Make it disappear. Across 30 local authorities, covering millions of British citizens, Keir Starmer's government quietly wrote to councils before Christmas and told them their May elections might not be happening. No vote, no choice, no accountability. Just Starmer and his government continuing to run your local council unchallenged for another year. And the reason, the real reason, not the official reason, is sitting right there in the polling numbers. Because in the areas where those elections were going to happen, Labour was polling third, behind Reform, behind the Greens, trailing in communities that Labour has represented for decades. In some of these councils, Labour has held power since before some of their own MPs were born. And they knew. They knew what was coming on May 7th. They knew the numbers. And they tried to make the numbers disappear by making the election disappear. This is not speculation. This is not conspiracy. This is what happened. And then something happened that Keir Starmer did not expect. He got caught. Reform UK took him to court. They won. The elections are back on. And on May 7th, in 25 days, millions of British people who were told their vote was being cancelled are going to the polling station. 82% of voters wanted those elections to go ahead. 82. That is not a polling margin. That is a verdict. One of the largest margins ever recorded in modern British polling. And when those same voters were told the government's official reason for the cancellations, 66% said it simply was not good enough. They knew it was about self-preservation. And now the entire country knows it too. Kemi Badenoch has been watching this unfold from the opposition benches. She is not needed to make it dramatic. She is not needed to exaggerate. She is just needed to point at what is happening and let British voters draw their own conclusions about a Prime Minister who tried to cancel the democratic process because he was afraid of the result. Subscribe to this channel right now. What you are about to hear is the full story, not the official version. Not the government's explanation about local government reorganisation and administrative complexity. The real story of why a Labour Prime Minister tried to remove your vote. How he was stopped, and what is coming on May 7th that has Downing Street more terrified than anything that has happened in this Parliament so far. Mainstream media will give you the managed version. We will give you the truth. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's start with what actually happened, because the official story, the one the government wants you to accept, is that this was about local government reorganisation, that some councils were in the middle of structural changes, merging into new unitary authorities, and that holding elections in the middle of that process would be confusing and administratively difficult. That is the explanation. That is what Steve Reed, the local government secretary, told councils in letters that went out quietly before Christmas, when most people were not paying attention. It is almost entirely false. Here is what is actually true. The government contacted 63 councils and invited them to raise concerns about holding their May elections. 63. But here is the thing. Not all of those councils were actually undergoing reorganisation. Not all of them had genuine administrative reasons to request a delay. What they had in common was something else entirely. Most of the 30 councils that initially had their elections cancelled were run by Labour. Read that again. Most of the councils where elections were going to be cancelled were Labour-controlled councils. Labour councils, facing an election in May, in a year when Labour is polling at 17% nationally, in a year when the party that dominated British local government for decades is projected to hold just 14 of the 128 councils it previously controlled. 17%. That is Labour's national polling right now. A historic low. Lower than they polled in 2019 when they lost to Boris Johnson. Lower than any point in the 21st century. In the areas where elections were being cancelled, they were trailing on 17%, with Reform at 28% and the Conservatives at 21%. Third place. In their own heartlands. And Keir Starmer's government tried to cancel the elections. The Electoral Commission, the independent body whose entire purpose is to protect the integrity of British elections, called the situation unprecedented, said it caused extraordinary uncertainty, questioned the credibility of the reasons being given. The body that exists to safeguard British democracy looked at what this government was doing and said it did not add up. Reform UK launched a judicial review. They took the government to court to force the elections to go ahead. And they won. The government backed down, reversed course, announced that the elections in those 30 councils would proceed as planned in May. And then, in a final humiliation that tells you everything about how this government operates, agreed to pay Reform's legal costs. The taxpayer paid for Nigel Farage's lawyers to force Keir Starmer to allow British citizens to vote. You know what that means, right? The government knew they were going to lose. When you agree to pay the other side's legal costs, you are not doing it out of generosity. You are doing it because your lawyers have told you that your position is indefensible and that continuing to fight will make things even worse. They paid Reform's legal costs because they knew Reform was right and they had been caught doing something they could not justify in front of a judge. Subscribe right now. They are counting on you not making noise about this. They are counting on the story being buried under the next news cycle, the next government announcement, the next carefully managed distraction. They cancelled your vote and hoped you would not notice. They got caught and hoped you would forgive and forget. Do not let them. Hit subscribe and share this with every person you know who values their right to choose who runs their community. Now let's talk about what is actually coming on May 7th. Because the elections that Starmer tried to cancel are now happening, and the numbers that scared him into trying to cancel them have not improved. If anything, they have gotten worse. Labour is projected to hold just 14 of the 128 councils where they previously won the most votes. 14, down from 82. That is not a bad night at the ballot box. That is a collapse without precedent in British political history. The party that swept to power in July 2024 with the biggest parliamentary majority in a generation is projected to be third nationally, behind Reform and the Conservatives, in the largest local election since 2023. In London, where Labour has dominated for years, where they won over 1,000 council seats in 2022, where the mayoralty sits safely in Labour hands, Reform is projected to make significant gains. In the northern councils that were once the bedrock of the Labour movement, councils where the party has been in power since the 1980s, Reform is projected to win. In Wales, Labour is polling third behind Reform and Plaid Cymru. In Scotland, they are a distant third with 12%. The party that built the NHS, that created the welfare state, that has represented working people in Britain for over a century, is looking at May 7th and seeing annihilation. And the man responsible for this, the man whose decisions, whose scandals, whose U-turns, whose catastrophic appointment of Peter Mandelson have driven this collapse, tried to cancel the elections. There is a word for what you call it when a leader removes the mechanism by which citizens can remove that leader from power. In a democracy, that word matters. And Kemi Badenoch has been the person saying it out loud, while Starmer's government reached for administrative language and reorganisation timetables to dress it up as something reasonable. She called it what it is: denying democracy, stripping communities of their right to choose. And the 82% of voters who said they wanted those elections to go ahead, regardless of the government's reasoning, agreed with her. Here is what Kemi Badenoch understood that Starmer did not. The moment you try to cancel an election, the story is no longer about the election. The story becomes about why you cancelled it. And the answer to that question, the only honest answer, is the one thing Starmer cannot say out loud. Because if he says it, he has admitted that his government is so damaged, so unpopular, so comprehensively rejected by the voters who trusted him, that he would rather remove the democratic process than face the result. He could not say it. So he said reorganisation. He said administrative complexity. He said practical necessity. And the British public, who are not stupid, who have watched every U-turn and every scandal and every broken promise and every attempt to manage the story, saw straight through it. 82%. One of the biggest margins ever recorded in modern polling. Not split down party lines. Not Conservative voters furious about elections being cancelled in Labour areas. voters across the political spectrum, regardless of who they support, saying that cancelling elections is not acceptable. That the right to vote is not something you negotiate away because the party in power is afraid of the result. This is the thing about democracy that authoritarian governments, and yes, that word is appropriate here, never understand. The moment you interfere with the process, you lose something that no amount of good policy can recover. You lose the fundamental presumption of legitimacy, the unspoken agreement between government and governed that says, whatever you think of us, whatever you think we have got wrong, you can remove us at the ballot box. The moment a government appears to be protecting itself from that process, it has broken the only agreement that makes everything else function. Starmer has broken it. Reform in the courts forced him to restore it. And on May 7th, the British people are going to deliver their verdict. Now here is why the local elections matter so much more than people realise. And this is the part that Kemi Badenoch has been pointing to while Starmer's allies desperately try to separate local election results from national leadership questions. Political analysts have been explicit. If Labour is wiped out on May 7th, and the polling suggests that is exactly what is going to happen, it will force a leadership change. That is not a Conservative talking point. That is the assessment of independent political scientists, of Labour MPs speaking on background, of the betting markets which now price an 83% chance that Starmer will not lead Labour into the next general election. 64% of voters want him to resign right now. That figure is worse than Liz Truss at her lowest, worse than Rishi Sunak when the Conservatives were heading toward their historic defeat. His net approval rating sits between -42 and -48, depending on which poll you read. There is no modern precedent for a Prime Minister this unpopular surviving, and he tried to cancel the elections that would have demonstrated this publicly. The local elections on May 7th are not just about who runs Lincoln City Council or who controls the London Borough of Wandsworth. They are the moment when every number that has been sitting in polling spreadsheets becomes real. When the abstract data points about Labour at 17% and Reform at 28% translate into actual ballot papers, actual results, actual councillors losing their seats, actual Labour strongholds turning to other parties for the first time in living memory. Kemi Badenoch knows this. She launched the Conservative local election campaign. She stood up and spoke about communities that deserve representation, about the right to choose, about a government that tried to remove accountability and was caught doing it. She did not need to be dramatic. The facts were dramatic enough. He tried to cancel your vote. Reform took him to court. He paid their legal costs. The elections are back on. And in 25 days, millions of British people are going to deliver a verdict that no spin machine in Westminster can manage, no government spokesperson can reframe, and no amount of administrative language about reorganisation timetables can explain away. Subscribe to this channel right now. Mainstream media will spend May 8th giving you the official reaction, the government's brave face, the carefully worded acknowledgement of disappointing results. They will not give you the full picture of what those results mean, or connect them back to a Prime Minister who tried to prevent them from happening. We will be here. We will show you everything. Subscribe now. Here is what May 7th is really about. It is about a Prime Minister who won a landslide in July 2024 and has spent the 19 months since then making decisions that have driven his support from a historic high to a historic low. The winter fuel cut that stripped warmth from 10 million pensioners. The Mandelson appointment that ended with a police arrest and 2 senior resignations. The 13 major U-turns that left his own MPs unable to defend him in their constituencies. The China trip that produced a photograph and nothing else. The defence plan promised 3 times that still does not exist. The North Sea sitting undrilled while Britain buys the same gas from Norway. Every single one of those decisions is on the ballot on May 7th. Not in theory, in practice. In the councils that are going to flip. In the seats that are going to change hands. In the results that will land on Friday morning and tell the story of what happens when a government treats voters as problems to be managed rather than people to be served. He tried to cancel your vote because he knew what you were going to say with it. Reform stopped him. The courts stopped him. And now he has to stand there and watch it happen. Kemi Badenoch said something about Starmer that your audience has not forgotten. A plastic bag blowing in the wind. She was right then. She is right now. Every decision he has made, including trying to cancel these elections, has been reactive. Defensive. Designed not to govern, but to survive. And on May 7th, survival is the one thing he cannot secure by cancelling anything, reversing anything, or managing anything. He has to face it. Share this video with every person you know who is going to be denied their vote in May. Share it with everyone in those 30 councils who received no communication, no explanation, no democratic process, just a quiet government letter before Christmas telling them their election might not happen. Share it with everyone who believes that a Prime Minister who tries to cancel elections has no business holding the office. They are counting on this story being forgotten before May 7th. Make sure it is not. 25 days. The elections that were supposed to be cancelled are happening, and the Prime Minister who tried to cancel them has to watch the results come in. He knew what was coming. That is why he tried to stop it. Now everyone knows why. They will remember.